Good evening, everyone. I'm Vanessa Brierty, and I'm an enrolled tribal member from the Pueblo of Laguna in the state of New Mexico. I'm so grateful to be sharing this space with you all on the ancestral homelands of the Chumash people. It is important that we recognize this because we are all stewards of this land. And for me, it is my inherent obligation, not only as a Native American, but as a human being, to take those cultural values that have been passed down for countless generations and utilize them with our future generations. I was so fortunate to hear my ancestral language being spoken in the home. The language, Dacia, or Keres, is specific to 7 of the 19 pueblos in the state of New Mexico. I heard it daily from my grandparents, and it was always spoken when I returned home to the reservation. For me, hearing the language gave me a sense of belonging, an identity and happiness that I was connected with a group of people. Language brings up an emotion for individuals, especially when it's your native language that you're connected to. And I would like to share a short clip of my late grandfather, my Baba, Bernard Sayo, and my niece, my Samaku, Evelyn Rose.
Hi, can we take this out and use it there?
As you saw, my niece had a reaction when my Baba was talking to her. He was letting her know about an upcoming trip back to the reservation. And although decades apart, they were able to connect through the language. Language is more than just thoughts, feelings, and emotions being shared. It is that deep connection to the ancestors, the land, and their communities as a whole. Language is a component of what is called the indigenous knowledge systems. These systems hold the cultural information necessary for our survival and have been passed down with purpose through the generations. These systems are an interconnected network of history, cultural practices, language, teachings, a place to share ideas and information. These are also another component of what is called our indigenous sovereignty. And to me, in the most basic terms, sovereignty is the people's ability to determine their current behavior and thereby their future. Language is a part, if not one of the most important components of indigenous sovereignty. Native languages are learned in the home. This learning comes from direct family contact, as well as relationships created between clans, social practices, and cultural activities. Although through forced assimilation and colonization, there have been many attempts to eliminate these communities, which has had adverse impacts on the individuals. A relative and language teacher of mine, who unfortunately passed away in 2021 due to health issues related to COVID, was influential in how I learned my own native language. His language lessons gave me a fascinating insight, not only into the language, but the culture that surrounds it. He himself spent his younger years far away from the Western school system while tending to his family's flock. He didn't even start to learn English until he was 8 years old. And he would often tell us stories of how he would run away from the tribal day school in shoes made from rubber tires. The language I learned with him was vital to my participation in ceremonies and village events back home on the reservation. The language then, it was more than a conversation. It was a connection, a spiritual connection with the ancestors, and asking through song and prayer for the continued health and wellness of the larger community. It is important to note that the language I learned there are not many words for bad or negative words, because it was our community's understanding to address any issues, correct them for the better of the community, to therefore strengthen the individual. Native American communities stood witness to the devastation that the COVID-19 pandemic had within our tribes. The lack of medical aid, the limited in-person visits, and the high death rates caused our communities to adapt, band together, and implement changes on our own to best manage the virus. These management strategies look like our own tribal control measures, and very strict epidemiological care was put into place. The use of language substantially helped and aided our communities in vaccinating our tribal elders and community members who carry much, if not all, of our cultural teachings. Language also was utilized to allow Native American communities to engage in safety protocols. This information was disseminated through radio announcements, tribal announcements, social media, U.S. postal mail. And for tribes to implement these strategies on their own also address the lack and gaps in inadequate care from places like the Indian Health Service. But it also provided a space for accountability for those like the Indian Health Service to engage in the legal trust agreements that were implemented between tribes and the government. The mental health issues that stem from colonization are rampant in our communities. And in order to best aid and support the communities, the American Psychiatric Association implemented and created a cultural framework that allows clinicians to effectively assess and implement cultural values and teachings into their patients' symptoms and treatment options. The use of language in this framework is amazing because it allows the individual to connect with their cultural practices and use language as a preventative measure, which you don't see very often in healthcare. And it also allows the individual to take care of themselves, not only in the physical being, but their mental well-being. The use of Native American languages in education has been compromised by the unresolved grief and trauma that has been inflicted upon our communities through the genocidal actions. This has caused historical trauma, which leads to intergenerational trauma. A soul wound, as Dr. Eduardo Duran defines, that is inflicted upon a community and lasts for generations. The reminiscent pain from all of this is observed when you sit with a Native American and they don't want to engage in their cultural practices nor speak their language. And so we might have to take a step back and ask the question, where is this from? And in order for us to provide answers to this question, we have to understand the lived experiences that Native Americans have had. Was it their experience in boarding schools, the forced removal of Native children, substance use in the home, or the unsettling awareness of our own missing and murdered relatives? Or is it the fact that our communities continue to die at higher rates than any other Americans in many categories, including chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, lower respiratory issues, diabetes, homicide, assault, self-harm, and even suicide? How can we come together and support these communities who might need additional guidance and help? I'd like to share with you all a term that I relate to our community, which is culture is healing. This concept utilizes the Native American knowledge that is inherent to us so we can implement it into our daily practices to continue to create that larger network of support. Because when languages do not have a space, opportunity, or motivation to thrive, failure of the culture will soon follow. When spaces, institutions, and policies continue to eliminate those Native American knowledge systems, we are not able to fulfill the dreams of our Naya and Neshtia, the mother and father of our world. And it is my struggle, my dream, and my hope that one day this puzzle will be complete and the result will be profound. And if there is anything that you can take away from today, is a term that we say, being a good relative. And that's being responsible for the people, the land, the culture, the traditions and teachings, all through love, generosity, and kindness. I share with you all, for you all to go forward, to be strong, be brave, be healthy, and be happy. So I thank you.